me, your man, Louie T. Welcome to the command post. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I, of course, am your commander-in-chief, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. So, Ron Rivera had what I thought was a very insightful presser after the first day of wave 2 of OTAs. Players are back on the field, getting after it. You love to see it. You love to hear about it. I told you I'm less about the performances of players on the field and more about what's being said. To me, that's what's most impactful this time of the year, because somebody could go out there. Now, I will say, it's all about stacking good performances on top of each other. I don't want to dismiss completely what is going on out on the field. Remember, last year, this time, we were hearing about what player? We were hearing about Derek Forrest impressing. Again, no pads on, but Derek Forrest was flying around. He looked way more comfortable, and he was making plays this time of the year. And look what that translated into during the season last year. So I don't want to completely dismiss what's going on the field. But, and I think there's some things you can't take away from anything in the trenches, though, which is what I'm most concerned with at this point, is offensive line-wise. You can't tell anything this time of the year, all right? Sam's throwing against air right now. You want to see him play well. I told you, anytime you're out there on the field, you want to put your best foot forward. But I tend not to put too much stock into anything that's being done right now in terms of how well someone is playing or not playing. I more so put more stock into what's being said, because the players right now are being groomed. And there's an expectation with Eric Bieniemy and the things that he's doing and how he wants them done. That's what I'm listening for. How these players are responding to what Eric Bieniemy is doing. How the players are responding to what Juan Castillo is doing. How the players are responding to what Tavita Pritchard is doing. How the players are responding to what Travell Wharton is doing. How the players are responding to Bobby Ingram and his coaching at the wide receiver position. These are the things I'm listening for, right? Not so much as what's going on the field, but what the players are saying, what the coaching staff is saying. And thus, listening to Ron today, I thought he dropped a few gems on our melon. I want to start first with Juan Castillo, because one of the things we've been kind of left out in the dark with all the change that's been going on, and obviously transitioning from one ownership group to another, is we haven't gotten a lot of confirmation as to who's what and what's role is this person playing on, like with Eric Bieniemy, for instance. He, when he got the job, when he was introduced, Ron introduced him as the assistant head coach, right? That's a big title. Ron said, I don't just give that out. I've been here for 3 years. This will be year 4, and I haven't given it to anybody. He could have given it to Jack. Jack's been a head coach in this league before, but he hasn't given that out. He gave it to Eric Bieniemy, and he gave it to him with a purpose. And that means he was going to put more on Eric Bieniemy's plate. And one of the things we're hoping that he being Eric Bieniemy with, is game management, clock management, when to use your timeout, when to throw the challenge flag. These are things we're hoping that Eric Bieniemy is sharp at and able to help Ron with on game days. We'll see. But, another thing that we've seen, it took Travell Wharton forever to get the title of offensive line coach, right? We knew he was the acting offensive line coach. We knew that it was a formality, but it took them forever to actually make it official. It's official now. He's the offensive line coach. But Juan Castillo, who is the tight ends coach, who took over last year, right, for Pete Hainer, and came in. I thought he did a solid job, even though the tight end position went kaput last year. It wasn't because of Juan Castillo. It was because of Scott Turner and his unwillingness to get the ball to the tight end group for whatever particular reason. That said, Juan Castillo, I knew him previous to Washington as an offensive line coach. Knew him in Philadelphia as an offensive line coach. I've known him in league circles as a guy that was really familiar with the offensive line. So I was actually shocked when they made him a tight ends coach. Now, you know, tight ends are an extension of the offensive line, and especially when you're talking about run game and things of that nature. So there's not that much difference. You treat tight ends like the offensive line when it comes to the run game in particular. When it comes to the pass game as protectors, you treat them very similar, right? You teach them the same type of techniques and fundamentals and things of that nature. So it's not that far of a stretch to go from offensive line coach to tight end coach. Now, in that same breath, I was shocked when I heard Ron Rivera talking about Juan Castillo being somewhat of an overseer of the offensive line, and he is in control, Juan Castillo that is, of the run game, putting together the run game, getting everything kind of sorted out, situated, and that's interesting to me. That's very interesting to me that he's the tight ends coach, but he's kind of overseeing the offensive line. And Ron said, look, we got a number of young coaches on the staff, and it's good to have veteran coaches. I like this approach, by the way, to help them kind of figure things out. You don't want to put too much on a young coach's plate and overwhelm them. So you have a guy kind of overseeing what they're doing, kind of help them with the ins and outs of putting things together. And so he says Juan Castillo is going to be a huge part of that. Okay, interesting stuff. The same could be said for Tavita Pritchard, right? They didn't get rid of Ken Zampese, right? They just gave him a different title. I don't even know what that title is. You know how it is in the NFL. If you love a dude, if a guy is one of your guys, you're going to find a way to keep him on your staff. You'll make up a title to give him. He's like the associate, offensive quality control coach or some shit like that. I don't know what his title is, right? But it's some crazy cockamamie title, but he's still on the staff. So Ken Zampese can kind of oversee the quarterback room. He can still oversee some of the processes that's going on with Tavita Pritchard, who's a very young coach. Remember, Tavita Pritchard was just playing football probably, 7-8 years ago. He was there when Andrew Luck was there. So it's not that long ago that he was a quarterback at Stanford. So, again, he's not that old, and this is his first experience in the NFL. So it's a lot different talking to, very impressionable, 18, 19, 20-year-olds versus talking to grown-ass men, right? So having Zampese still be there to help with, the transition, that's great. And you're hearing a lot of that from Ron, like, hey, we got a lot of guys in place. And this is why I've been so excited about this season, is because I think for the first time we're going to be well coached in Washington. I think a lot of guys were here because Ron was comfortable with them in his previous stop in Carolina, and he just brought those guys along for the ride instead of assessing who was actually doing a great job and who wasn't, and leaving those guys behind as he moved on to his next opportunity here in Washington. He just brought everybody along for the ride. And I think it took until last season for him to really, truly see who was actually doing a great job, who was dead weight and really pulling him down and pulling the team down. And, systematically, he's made changes. It's taken a while, maybe a little bit longer than I would have liked it to, but we've gotten to the destination that we ultimately wanted to, which is change. And the thing that I felt like hindered us greatly last year was we weren't well coached. I thought we were a poorly coached football team, specifically on the offensive side, right? I didn't feel like we were coached up well at all. I didn't like what they were doing on the offensive line, shuffling guys in and out. You can't get any continuity if you're taking your left guard out and you're inserting a new left guard in for 3 possessions. This isn't college football. We can't be taking guys out, yo-yoing them in and out of the lineup and changing positions and all that shit in game. That's dumb, all right? Find 5 guys you trust, put them in the game, and let's rock and roll. And we saw what was going on with the D-line. They couldn't stand Sam Mills. Took them long enough to get rid of him, but they finally did. We know about Scott Turner. He was dead weight. He was holding this offense back. Took Ron long enough, but he finally got rid of him. I really liked, the wide receiver coach, Drew Terrell. I really liked, Chris Harris and all the guys that were here. And I thought those were some really quality coaches. But they moved on to better opportunities for themselves. And so we brought in guys there. But I like that they brought in Tavita Pritchard, a young, a younger coach that has a different message that can relate to these players a little bit better. I like that they brought in or promoted Travell Wharton. I like that it's a lot of new blood. You still have some of the old guys around showing them the ropes, but I like the new voice, right? So Ron talked about all of this kind of interconnecting, you know, and how all of it is starting to come together. And the beauty of what he's doing right now is he's being able to kind of oversee everything. You know, doesn't have to be as hands-on this year, you know, with EB coming in and really taking charge, and with all these guys that he's put in place with, you know, veteran coaches who have been doing it for a very long time. Ron said when he first got here, I like teachers. I like guys who have a wealth of knowledge. So you keep those guys around, like Juan Castillo, like Ken Zampese. You keep those guys around, but you don't have them in those positions where they're actually the coach for that particular position. They're just overseeing the process, helping a young coach kind of get his legs under him. So, you know, Ron talked about being able to be more of a manager this time around, and not having that be the case the last few years, but having more of that this year and being able to oversee all of the process, which is what a coach is really supposed to do. You're really supposed to be a supervisor of sorts. You walk around, make sure shit's running the way that it's supposed to, and you know that these coaches are checking off all the boxes, doing things the way that you would do it if you were in their position, and things of that nature. So you start with Juan Castillo, and his role, it's a much bigger role than I thought, as he expands a bit over to the offensive line side of things. He talked about, you know, contracts and you know, because of the roster moves that were made yesterday, and we touched on that already. You guys already knew about those roster moves. There were more questions about, hey, if you need to make more moves or even a bigger one, are you able to do that? And it kind of was an extension of another question that was asked of Ron about Cam Curl and his contract situation, because Cam Curl, again, he was in camp, or not camp, excuse me, OTAs last week, but he was doing the individual drills, not working in the team setting. And Cam did a really good job of maneuvering around the questions because they were trying to get something out of him that he wasn't really looking to give. And so Cam was pretty much like, I'm here with my brothers. I'm here with my bros. I love being around them. I love the camaraderie, and that's why I'm here. You know, I'm here for them, and, you know, I'm here because I want to be here. But he never really answered the question about, was he not participating in the team drills because of his contract, which he is. He's not participating in the team drills because of his contractual situation. He wants a new deal, and that's his way of letting them know, I want a new deal, without being, you know, a problem or a distraction. So he's doing it the right way. He's doing it the way Duran did it last year. And that's why it's important to show players what the right way is so that they can follow the template in the blueprint. Because when you don't show them, hey, if you do it the right way, we're going to pay you here. If you don't show them what the right way is, you get guys doing whatever the hell they want to do. When you show them that, hey, here's how you handle a situation, and if you handle it well and you go out and take care of your business on the field, we're going to take care of you. Don't you worry, right? They did it with Jonathan Allen. Remember, Jonathan Allen held out of a couple of practices, remember, right? They did it with Terry McLaurin. Remember, Terry held out of some practices during this time of the year, right? Remember, right? And it did it with Deron Payne. And Deron showed up. Remember, there was this big, you know, discussion about, did Deron leave practice early? And Deron came back and was like, man, y'all goofy as hell. I ain't leave practice. I've been here. I want to be here. I'm practicing. I just want to play ball. I don't know what the hell y'all talking about. And he put all that shit to bed. But he wasn't participating in the group practices, right? In a group setting. He was just doing the individuals off to the side. But he got paid, though, because he went out and balled on the field. Same thing could be said for Cam Curl. I think they're ready to pay him right now if they had, you know, the resources to do so. But Ron made it abundantly clear that they're not in a position to hand out any big deals right now until new ownership comes in and they're able to discuss that with them. Now, he did say if something were to arise, if a situation were to come to the table and they wanted to pounce on it, he would then have to reach out to Daniel Snyder to see if it was okay. which he hasn't had to do all offseason. He hasn't had to really be in communication with the Snyders. He's been handling shit himself pretty much, along with GM Martin Mayhew and Marty Herney and company. They've been pretty much operating as one big well-oiled machine this offseason without ownership kind of overseeing everything, because there really hasn't been any ownership to oversee it. However, you know, they're kind of wanting to push the brakes a bit on doing anything, because obviously you don't know what the next group coming in would like to do or not like to do. So Ron made it sound like, hey, look, we want Cam Curl here. Like, it is, you know, that's not a question. It's just a matter of, we need to talk it over with the next ownership group to make sure that they're on board with bringing back this young man and paying him the money that we feel like he's worthy of. So it's something just to keep an eye on until all of that stuff gets ironed out. We're kind of in limbo with a lot of things that they may or may not want to do. I thought the most impactful conversation, matter of fact, we're going to say that for last. The next thing that was interesting, obviously a lot of the questions are going to be surrounding Sam Howell and his development and what have you seen from him and things of that nature. And he's like, yeah, he's getting more and more comfortable with what we're asking him to do. He's getting more and more comfortable in the huddle with the play calls. And, you know, what I've heard from players, Curtis Samuel said this, Terry said this, the calls are very long. Sam said it himself. He had a presser today as well. And he said the play calls are very wordy, right? So when you get into these West Coast play calling situations, it can get really, really dicey in terms of, you know, how many words are being used to tell everybody what their specific job is on that play. And keep in mind, when you have a play call, you're telling the offensive line what to do. You're telling the tight ends what to do. You're telling the wide receivers what to do. That's why a lot of times when you see a huddle formed, the wide receivers usually get their information first. That's why they're the first to leave the huddle. They literally can get what they need out of the first probably 4 to 5 words of the play call, and that's why they can break out. You usually see the wide receivers split off, you know, if they're trying to get out of the huddle, because they got the furthest to go when you talk about getting to the line of scrimmage and getting set. So they like to get out of there as fast as possible. They're the first usually in the play call, so they hear it, they know what they got to do, and they get out of there. But then you got to, you know, as a quarterback, you got to tell the running backs what to do. You got to tell the tight ends what to do. You got to tell the offensive line what to do. And then if you got to attach anything to it in terms of, hey, you know, check with me, or, hey, we're going on 2, or any of that stuff, if we see this look, we'll go to this. Like, so it can get really wordy. And Ron said that they actually mic'd up Sam Howell and all the quarterbacks, but they started with Sam in particular just to see how he was handling the play caller, because the verbiage is very wordy, to see how he was doing with that. And they said he's really handling it well, that he is really acclimating to the verbiage, and that he's starting to really get comfortable knowing where everyone's supposed to be, you know, and you know, taking care of those things, because that's half the battle, is just knowing exactly what is the play call and what that means, what it entails, what it means for the receivers, what it means for the tight ends, what it means for the backs. So, you know, listening to Sam, he said, like, that's the first time I've ever been a part of anything like that. That's a little bit different, but, you know, it's been very helpful. And I love listening to Sam, because Sam is like, yo, I like being coached hard. Curtis Samuel said the same thing. Terry McLaurin said the same thing. You know, Jonathan Allen feels that way. We like being coached hard. And he said the beauty of what you're getting out of Eric Bieniemy right now is that there's no plays off. You might be going 110% for 99% of the snaps, and that 1% that you decide to, you know, kind of throttle it down, he's down your throat. He's jumping on your back and telling you, you know, come on, give me everything you got. So, you know, I think that's the type of stuff I like hearing this time of the year, because what you're doing is you're setting a foundation for a team that's going to be more in shape, a team that's going to be more mentally tough. You want to know why the Chiefs are so good? Yeah, they got talent. Yeah, they got this, they got that. Yep, they got Patrick Mahomes. Yep, they got Travis Kelce. Yep, they got Andy Reid. They got a lot of shit that helps you win a lot of football games. But you know what else they had? Mental toughness. When shit got tough, when they fell down in the fourth quarter, when shit isn't going their way, When the other team starts to get tired, they're not. You know why? Because Eric Bieniemy was cracking the whip. And that's what we need more of. And that's what you see or that's what you're hearing from the players right now, is that he's not letting up. And Mahomes said it over and over again, and that was my rallying cry when we first got Eric Bieniemy. Accountability, accountability, accountability. EB helped me accountable every single day. Travis Kelce, EB helped me accountable every single day. That's what he's doing with these players, holding them accountable every single day, every single play, and it's going to yield dividends for this football team in September, in October, as your body's starting to wear down in November. Remember, we don't have a bye week until week 14, the latest possible bye you can have. So as this team starts to wear down into November, still looking for that bye week, they're going to remember what happened in May. They're going to remember EB cracking the whip in April. They're going to remember EB cracking the whip in August and in July. And that's what's going to push them to make that extra play, to be able to do the things that we weren't capable of doing last year, the year before that. So I said all of that to circle back around. Sam Howell is progressing, and they're listening to the huddle calls. EB's offense, because it's a West Coast offense, a little wordy, and it takes time, but he's handling it well. He's transitioning well, and they're listening to it, and he's getting a lot from that. And so that's really positive to hear. I thought the thing that Ron said that stuck out the most, to me at least, was the cornerback room. And we've had so many discussions about what are they going to do with all these corners. And so many of you, oh my God, they're going to cut Kendall Fuller. And I'm like, what are you guys, insane? Kendall Fuller was the most consistent corner we had last year. You got to be out of your damn mind. For a team that wants turnovers, one of the few guys in the secondary along with Defoe that was creating turnovers, you want to get rid of him? Right? We only had 3 touchdowns on defense last year, but 2 of them were from Kendall Fuller, right? Like, it's not like we had a bevy of guys producing big plays last season. So at the end of the day, like, I was adamant. Now, I remember somebody very vividly telling me, Louie T, you're wrong. I said, when we get out to week 1, Kendall Fuller will be on the boundary as a starting corner across from you fill in the blank. I think it's going to be Emmanuel Forbes. I've said this already. Last year, they experimented with Benjamin St-Juste inside in the slot. Only reason that he got to go back outside and play with the big boys was because they had an injury to William Jackson III and then ultimately, subsequently released him. And so he had to stay outside. They didn't have any more options to go out there, and so he had to go out there. So I think they're going to go back to Benjamin St-Juste inside as a nickel. I don't love it, okay? I don't love that. I didn't love it last year. I didn't think he was all that great in the slot early in the season. Jacksonville or Detroit game, I thought he was getting cooked. And there were some errant throws and some guys missed some opportunities, and that's what kind of saved him. I don't love him inside, but we'll see what they decide to do ultimately. Ron said they've tried both Benjamin St-Juste and Emmanuel Forbes inside and outside. The only guy that hasn't kicked inside at all is Kendall Fuller. And his reasoning for that is last year they went to more of a zone match principle scheme where, you know, again, you're responsible for your zone until a player runs into your zone, then you match them and you run with them. Kendall Fuller, very smart. We've already talked about this. I've tried to talk sense into most of you, some of you in ear, one ear out the other when it comes to Kendall Fuller. But I was very adamant about Kendall Fuller is one of the smartest players on the defense. He talks about film study. You see it on the field. That's why you don't see wide receiver screens work to his side, because he has keys and tells from his film study that lets him know when they're, you know, when their split is this is what they're trying to get to. That's why he always is in the backfield making tackles on these wide receiver screens and breaking that shit up. He's a heady football player. And in you know, a zone match principle, you got to be smart. Everybody has to know their job and be aware of what's going on, see the route combinations, happening in front of them and be able to play off of that. Fuller's one of the best on the team at that. So they don't want to disturb him. He played really well last year in that zone match principle, and they want to keep him outside. I told you guys he was going to be outside. A lot of y'all are like, you tripping, Louie T. They're kicking him inside or they're moving him to safety. They're not moving him to safety. We got plenty of safeties, okay? So he's staying outside, is Kendall Fuller. Now the question is it Forbes or is it St. Juste that goes inside? Now keep in mind, you got Quan Martin, who they like as a nickel, who can come down and play over the slot. And Ron said Quan Martin not only has been able to play safety in the nickel, he's also been able to go outside and play corner as a boundary corner, which is intriguing because while I knew he was capable of doing that, and he did that in college a little bit, the reason we thought he was drafted, and I think what ultimately will prove itself to be true, is that they drafted him to be more of that nickel safety hybrid. But I think his flexibility gives them a little bit more breathing room as far as what they decide to do with these corners. I think that's a direct correlation to them moving on from Cam Dantzler already, is because Quan Martin gives them a little bit more flexibility as a guy that can play outside in a pinch if you need him to. That said, I don't like Emmanuel Forbes playing inside. Not everybody's built to play inside. Ron acknowledged that. Like, not everybody is built to play as a nickel inside as a slot guy. But he said that Jack told him playing as a nickel helps you learn all the positions. You have to be really, really smart to play inside and outside and know what everybody's responsibility is. And so they feel like that's going to speed up his learning curve. Now, I myself am not one to overload a young player. I felt like that's what they did with Jamin Davis in his rookie season. They put too much on his plate. They tried to put him at middle linebacker, have him learn all of the positions, and it bogged him down. It was too much thinking, not enough reacting, and not enough running around and using his athleticism because he was so busy trying to figure out what the hell was going on. I think it's counterproductive to overload a young player. Let that young guy flourish at what he's good at, and as he continues to show you the capacity to add on more, you give him more, right? But they're going with this approach of let's put as much of it on his plate as possible and see how he handles it. And look, I'm not there every day. I don't know how smart he is. Maybe he's a student of the game and he can handle all of this and this will benefit him. I myself am of the thought process of just allowing a guy to be good at what he's good at first. And as he continues to show you that I'm ready for more, you add more to his plate. But I would like to see, and this is what I ultimately think is going to happen. You're going to have Fuller on one side, outside. You're going to have Emmanuel Forbes on the other side, and Juice is going to be the guy that's inside as one of your nickels. And on the other side, if they have another nickel where they're bringing down that Buffalo, I think you're going to see a guy like Quan Martin, you know, or you're going to see Cam Curl, right, as a run defender, getting into those run fits, things of that nature. So at the end of the day, right now they're playing around with those three corners. Nothing's set in stone, but what sounds like is going to be set is Kendall Fuller as a boundary corner, to the dismay of many of you. But I tried to warn you, Fuller's not going anywhere, and he's going to start. And I told y'all, when week one comes, Kendall Fuller will be right there at, I think I said left cornerback, right out there where he always is. I don't see that changing, and I feel like that's been confirmed now by Ron saying he's the only guy they haven't touched and moved inside at all. So we'll see what happens. I find this cornerback and really the entire secondary to be fascinating because I haven't seen this much depth in Washington in a very long time. You probably got to go back to, I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen this much depth in the secondary. How good is it is the question. How good is this depth? But it's a lot of good football players in the secondary right now. Really good football players. So I feel really good about this group. And they got some decisions to make. Excuse me. So I thought Ron said a lot today. Dropped a lot of gems on our melon. And you know what he also said about Sam Howell? He said that those joint practices against the Ravens are going to be extremely telling for him. I think that's when he's going to ultimately announce that Sam's the starter. If Sam handles that week of practice against the Ravens leading up to that second preseason game really well, I think that's when they announce officially that Sam Howell is the starter for the 2023 season, and they just move on. Like, they know he's the starter right now. He's shown them everything that they needed to see. Again, no pads are on. He's not going to be touched when the pads go on anyway. He's going to have on a yellow jersey. They're not going to be able to touch him regardless. However, bullets will be a little bit more active flying around, and so you'll see a little bit more out of him then. But I think those practices against the Ravens, those joint practices, they're going to put him in some situations, and they're going to see how he reacts. And if he passes that test with flying colors, they're going to make the announcement right then and there. All right, he's our starter for the upcoming season. If he doesn't, I still think he's going to be a starter regardless, but they won't announce it, as early. But we know what it is. And Ron's been, if we follow the path that Ron has set in the previous 3 years when he's had to, because just about every single year, Ron's had to make a decision at quarterback, going all the way back to his first year with Dwayne. After that Dwayne year, which he made that announcement pretty early, he's waited until, the last preseason game to announce who his starter was. He almost didn't even tell us in 2021 with Ryan Fitzpatrick. He almost didn't say anything. Kind of like just, it was unspoken. You just knew what it was. Last year, you knew it was going to be Heineke, right? Wentz. We knew it was Wentz, and he made it abundantly clear. Wentz is our QB1. We traded for him. We made him QB1. There's nothing else to talk about, but he knew Wentz was mentally fragile and didn't need any competition. So I think he's going to try to drag this thing out, but we know who the starter is going to be. But he's made it abundantly clear that week of practice, the joint practices with the Ravens in August, going to go a long way in helping them determine whether Sam Howell is the guy for the job or not, which we know he is. So, again, a lot of gems dropped by Ron today. If you haven't had a chance, it's 19 minutes. Check out that presser. You won't be sorry. So, that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on the Command Post. I will be live tomorrow night, 9:30 p. We'll have a lot to discuss. We'll continue to talk about OTAs. Curtis Samuel, now going by the nickname C4. For those who remember, he changed his jersey number to 4, and he said he's always been number 4, and he's just happy to get back to number 4. He also said they're moving him around in a multitude of ways now, and he said they've got me everywhere, and he's loving it. He didn't want to get into too many specifics, but he's like, yo, they moving me around. It's going to be fun. I like what they're doing. So, and Sam Howell said, I watched a lot of Kansas City Chiefs tape to prepare me for what I was going to be asked for. So I matched up. This is why I know Sam isn't going to fail, because Sam is putting in the extra work. All right. Sam wants to be great. I've listened to enough people that know Sam and know his demeanor and his temperament and say that this guy's a workaholic. This guy wants to be great. All right. Sam is watching Chiefs tape over the offseason when he couldn't have contact with the coaching staff so that he could see Mahomes' footwork and match his footwork up with that of Patrick Mahomes to help his timing and rhythm get down to what they're going to ask him to do. And so he's like, the transition has been seamless for me because I was working on that stuff with my quarterbacks coach back in Carolina all offseason about timing up the footwork with the offense that they're running. Sam's locked in. All right? Sam's locked in. So I'm excited, man. If you can't tell, I'm excited. Anyway, we'll be live tomorrow night. We'll have so much to discuss. Looking forward to seeing you guys then. But in any event, it's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on the Command Post. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. Until next time, you guys have a good one.
LouieTeeNetwork.